When Caroline Leavitt stepped into the Fox News studio shortly after the death of Pope Francis, the audience expected a sharp political interview from the White House press secretary, but the atmosphere quickly turned unsteady. Sean Hannity tried to keep the conversation light, but Caroline didn't follow the script. She was quiet, her eyes fixed on an old envelope with a red Vatican wax seal on the table. That moment shifted everything. From a routine interview, it gradually became something entirely different. A live revelation, an untold secret, and a truth long concealed. When her final words rang out, what she announced could change how we view faith, power, and hidden conspiracies. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Under the bright studio lights, thunderous applause greeted Caroline Leavitt. The air was electric, the audience holding their breath for a fiery interview. But on the interview table, next to a gleaming glass of water, an old envelope with a deep red Vatican seal lay silently like a mystery waiting to be awakened. Caroline walked in, her smile sharp, but her eyes briefly uneasy. Glancing at the envelope, she sat down, her hands unconsciously tightening. The host, Sean Hannity, with his professional demeanor, opened. "Hello, everyone. Tonight we have a special guest, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt." "Thank you for being here, Caroline," she nodded, responding briefly. "Thank you, Sean," Hannity continued, his voice calm but pointed. "You've been shaking up the political scene from the Trump campaign to major policy decisions. But today, what do we want to hear from you? A fresh perspective on the White House or something else?" The audience chuckled lightly, but Caroline didn't match the humor. She took a deep breath, cutting in. "I'm not here to talk politics, Sean. I'm here because of a promise to Pope Francis." The studio fell silent. Hannity raised an eyebrow, his voice still steady. "Pope Francis, promise. You're making the world curious." Caroline nodded, her eyes resolute but her voice slightly trembling. "He entrusted me with a secret, and tonight I'm breaking that silence." The audience murmured, phones discreetly raised. The envelope on the table seemed to radiate a strange pull, drawing every gaze to Caroline, who held a truth never before revealed. Caroline Leavitt sat motionless in the studio, her eyes still glued to the Vatican envelope, as if it whispered memories she'd tried to bury. Sean Hannity, sensing the shift in the air, leaned forward, his voice lower. "You just mentioned a promise to Pope Francis. That's a big statement, Caroline. Can you tell us more? What happened between you and him?" She took a long breath, as if gathering the courage to open a door to the past. "It started not long ago," she began, her voice calm but carrying an indescribable weight. "I received an invitation, not through email or official letter, a handwritten letter delivered by a priest in person. It came from him, Pope Francis," the audience whispered, but Caroline seemed not to hear. She sank into her memories, her voice growing more vivid, as if reliving every moment. "I was in Rome at the time, accompanying President Trump's delegation. We were at the Vatican to discuss religious freedom, a topic I'd spoken about extensively during the campaign. I thought I was just a small part of the trip, a spokesperson behind the spotlight. But then one evening while I was at the hotel, a priest knocked on my door." She paused, her gaze distant, as if seeing the man standing before her. "He didn't introduce himself, just handed me an envelope. Inside was a small note written in slanted black ink. 'I wish to meet you, just the two of us at Casa Santa Marta. Come at midnight. Signed, Francis.'" Hannity raised an eyebrow, clearly drawn into the story. "A personal invitation from the Pope. How did you feel?" Caroline gave a faint smile, but it didn't hide her confusion at the time. "I thought it was a joke or a mistake. I'm just a girl from New Hampshire working in politics, not someone with a foot in the Vatican. But something about the letter, its sincerity, or maybe its boldness, made me unable to refuse," she continued, her voice steady but full of emotion. "At midnight, a plain black car picked me up from the hotel. No flashing lights, no security, just a silent driver. We drove through Rome's narrow streets to a side gate of the Vatican where there were no tourists or cameras. Another priest led me through cold stone corridors, the light from flickering torches dancing on the walls. Finally, I entered a small room in Casa Santa Marta, and there he was, sitting on a wooden chair, dressed in a simple white cassock. The audience held their breath, the studio transforming into a sacred space. Caroline described Pope Francis with reverence mixed with awe. He looked smaller than I'd imagined, weary as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. But his eyes, they shone as if they could see through my soul. He stood, took my hand and said, "Thank you for coming, Caroline. I heard your speech on faith and freedom. It wasn't like political words. It came from the heart." She paused as if trying to process what she'd heard. We sat down and he began to speak, not about politics or diplomacy, but about the church, about what he'd seen and felt. He said being Pope wasn't glory, but a burden. Some days, he said, I pray, but hear only silence. Not from God, but from the very people I trust. Hannity interjected, his voice cautious. You mean he felt alone in the Vatican? Caroline nodded, her eyes heavy, more than alone. He spoke of shadows in the church, people who claimed to be Christian but acted for power, money, or something worse. He tried to reform, but every step felt like walking on thin ice. And then he looked straight at me and said, I need an outsider, someone with a voice strong enough to speak the truth, and I've chosen you. She reached out to touch the envelope on the table as if to confirm it was still there. He gave me this envelope sealed with red wax. He instructed, don't open it now. Only open it when I'm gone. You'll know when the time comes. I wanted to ask more, but he just smiled, placed a hand on my shoulder and said, faith isn't answers. It's the courage to ask questions. Caroline recounted, leaving Casa Santa Marta, her mind reeling. I returned to the hotel, the envelope in my bag like a heavy stone. I didn't know what he saw in me, a political spokesperson, not a theologian or a nun, but something in his voice, in the way he looked at me, made me feel I couldn't turn away. Hannity leaned in, his voice lower. Did you open the envelope? I mean, right after meeting him. She shook her head, her gaze unwavering. No, I promised. And I kept that promise even though it cost me sleepless nights. But when he passed away, everything changed. I knew I could no longer stay silent. The studio remained deathly quiet, the audience captivated by the story. Caroline looked directly into the camera, her voice ringing like a declaration. He entrusted me with a mission, and tonight I will fulfill it. In the studio, Caroline Leavitt's eyes remained sharp, but her hands gripped the edge of the table as if holding on to a secret ready to burst. The Vatican envelope lay still, its red wax seal glowing like a reminder of the promise she'd carried from Rome. Shan Hannity, with the instincts of a veteran journalist, sensed the weight in her story. He leaned in, his voice cautious. Corinne, you've just shared about a secret meeting with Pope Francis, an envelope he entrusted to you. But what happened next? What made you decide to reveal everything on live television tonight? Caroline took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the audience as if searching for an anchor in the whirlwind of memories. After that night in the Vatican, she began, her voice low and deliberate. I thought things would go back to normal. I'd continue my work, be a spokesperson, face the media, and forget about the envelope. But I was wrong. She recounted the days after returning to the U.S. when her busy life as White House press secretary was disrupted by strange signs. A week after the Rome trip, I found a small note in my purse. No idea where it came from. Just a few lines written in blue ink. Keep the envelope secret. Words kill faster than knives. I thought it was a prank, but then more notes appeared. One slipped under my hotel door in D.C., another mailed with no return address. All warned the same thing. Stay silent or pay the price. The audience began to murmur, but Caroline didn't stop. She described the feeling of being hunted, though no one ever appeared before her. I started noticing small details. A black car parked too long near my office. An unknown call just breathing before hanging up. I told myself I was imagining things, that work stress was making me paranoid, but deep down I knew something was wrong. Hannity cut in, his voice sharp. Did you report it to anyone? The police or the White House security team? Caroline shook her head, a bitter smile flickering. I wanted to, but I was scared. Scared that if I spoke up, Someone would think I wasn't sane enough for this job, or worse, they'd come for the envelope. I hid it in a small safe at home, but every night it felt like a ticking bomb. She shifted, her voice softening as if sharing a private secret. Then one night, everything changed. I had a dream unlike any before. I saw myself standing in a vast hall, marble walls gleaming, but no chairs, no people, just me, and at the end of the room, he stood there. Pope Francis. The audience fell silent, drawn into the image she painted. Caroline continued, her eyes as if peering into another world. He wasn't wearing the white cassock from the Vatican. He wore a plain gray cloak like a pilgrim. He approached and I felt warmth from him, but also a deep sadness. He said, Caroline, you carry the voice the world needs, but you must choose. Keep yourself safe or let the truth guide you. She paused, swallowing hard as if trying to hold back emotion. Then he mentioned a memory I'd tried to forget. When I was young, my grandmother took me to church in New Hampshire. Once, when my parents were struggling, I knelt before a statue of Mary and prayed. I didn't know what I was praying for, but I remember feeling peace. In the dream, the Pope said, "You prayed for light as a child. Now you must carry it, even if darkness chases you." Hannity, clearly captivated, asked, "What do you think it was? A dream or something more?" Caroline shrugged, her eyes heavy. "I don't know, but when I woke up, I was trembling, drenched in sweat. It felt like he was speaking to me from somewhere, not here. That dream made me realize I couldn't run anymore. The envelope wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a responsibility." She went on about the days that followed. As the pressure mounted, I started noticing changes in my team. A close advisor asked if I was okay, as if he knew something. A journalist called, hinting at rumors of a Vatican secrets tied to me. I felt trapped in a game whose rules I didn't understand. She looked straight at Hannity, her voice resolute. But what made me decide to speak wasn't the notes or the dream. It was when I heard he'd passed away. I sat in my office watching news of his funeral and felt an emptiness. I knew if I didn't speak, I'd betray not just him, but myself. The audience remained silent, as if pulled into a story bigger than themselves. Caroline lightly touched the envelope, her fingers grazing the wax seal. "I brought the envelope here tonight because I couldn't live with the silence any longer. He chose me, not because I'm strong or smart, but because he believed I'd dare to speak when the time came." Hannity nodded, his voice lower. "And that time is now." She nodded, her eyes fixed on him. When audience said, her eyes fixed on him. "Yes, but before I open this envelope, I need everyone to understand. What I'm about to reveal isn't just about the Pope. It's about all of us." The studio sank into a heavy silence, as if everyone held their breath before a door about to open. Sean Hannity leaned in, his voice low with curiosity. "Caroline, you've shared about the secret meeting, the threatening notes, the dream like a message. What made you choose this stage, this moment to break the silence?" Caroline looked at the envelope, her fingers lightly tracing it as if seeking courage. "Not one moment," she said, her voice quiet but firm, each word deliberate. "It was thousands of tiny moments piling up until I couldn't ignore them." She spoke of the weeks following the news of Pope Francis's death. "When I learned he was gone, it was like being locked behind a slammed door. I was in my office watching reports of his funeral, feeling I was letting him down. That envelope wasn't just paper. It was the trust he placed in me. But I was scared of what it held, scared of the price I'd pay." She described the pressure of her role as White House press secretary. Every day was filled with press briefings, reporters defending the administration, but the anonymous notes kept coming. One in my briefcase on a flight to Florida, another left on my car's windshield. All said, "Stay silent or lose everything." I started suspecting everyone. Staff friends. My husband noticed I was different, but I couldn't tell him. "How do you explain something you don't understand?" Hannity interrupted, his voice sharp. "Did you ever consider letting it go, locking the envelope away and moving on?" Caroline looked directly at him, unflinching. "Every day I have a son, just a few months old, a husband who trusts me, a career I fought to build. Opening that envelope could destroy it all, but I remembered his voice that night in Rome. He chose me not because I was brave, but because he believed I'd find the strength when it mattered. Her tone shifted stronger. Then one morning, everything changed. I was feeding my son when a package arrived. No address, just a brown envelope. Inside was a typed note, unsigned, "The time has come. Speak or the truth dies with him." With it was a small silver cross like the one my grandmother used to wear. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The audience was silent, the studio as if holding its breath. Caroline's words carried a compelling sincerity. That night I paced the living room, envelope in hand. I thought of my family, the risks, but I also thought of the kids at that New Hampshire church, the people finding hope and faith. If what he gave me could protect that, even a little, how could I stay silent? She explained why she chose live television. I needed a place where no one could edit my words, where the world would hear clearly. This show, this moment is the only chance. I told my team I'd do an interview, but not why. They thought it was about policy. Only I knew it was something bigger. Hannity tilted his head, his voice softer. "Aren't you afraid of the consequences for you?" "For the administration?" Carolyn nodded, her eyes honest. "I'm still afraid, but fear isn't a reason to betray a promise." I picture him in that simple room, trusting me with something he couldn't carry. "If I don't speak now, I'll spend my life regretting the chance to save someone." She sat up straight, hands on the table, the envelope between them, like a silent witness. "Before coming here, I did something I hadn't in a while. I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and knelt. I prayed not for answers, but for courage. I saw my grandmother's face, heard her tell me to stand tall, and I felt him somewhere urging me forward." The audience was silent, gripped by her words. Her voice was firm, her eyes flashing with defiance. "I'm not here to be a hero. I'm here because a man who carried the world asked me to carry a piece of it, and tonight I'll keep my word." Hannity nodded slowly, sensing the weight of the moment. "So what's next, Caroline? You're holding the envelope. Are you ready to show us what's inside?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she lifted the envelope, the red wax seal glinting. "This isn't just about what's inside," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "It's about what happens when we stop running from the truth. I don't know what I'll find, but I can't turn back." The studio lights seemed to dim, the world narrowing to Caroline and the envelope with its vivid red seal sitting between her and Shan Hannity like a wordless challenge. The audience, swept up in the tale of a secret meeting, threatening notes, and a strange dream, held their breath. Hannity sensed this moment would transcend a typical interview. He looked directly at Caroline, his voice low but sharp. "You've taken us on an incredible journey, Caroline. Now you're holding that envelope. What are you going to do with it?" Caroline gripped the envelope, her fingers tracing the wax seal, her eyes resolute but with a flicker of tremor. "I've carried it too long," she said, her voice ringing clear as if casting aside all hesitation. "Pope Francis gave it to me because he believed I'd know when the time came. And now I know." Without waiting, she placed the envelope on the table, pulling a small knife from her jacket pocket, a gift from her grandmother, its handle engraved with a cross. Under the studio lights, the blade glinted as she carefully cut through the wax. The sound of the seal breaking was soft but sharp, like a door swinging open. The audience leaned forward, some whispering, but Caroline seemed not to hear. She opened the envelope, pulling out a thin sheet of paper, the Pope's slanted handwriting clear. She took a deep breath, her voice calm but heavy with weight. "These are his words," she began, and read, "Caroline, you are light in the storm. I write these lines with a heavy heart, for the church I love is being eaten from within. There are those who claim God's name, but act for power. They don't destroy with swords, but with smiles and false promises. I have fought, but I cannot defeat them alone." The studio was silent, only Caroline's voice echoing. She continued, "I see a shadow not from the church, but cloaked as a friend. He will make faith vanish, not through war, but through emptiness. If I am gone, you must speak, for truth is the only flame left." The audience stirred, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Hannity, eyes wide, interjected. You're saying the Pope foresaw a villain, a specific threat. Caroline didn't answer immediately. She set the paper down, pulling another note from the envelope, a smaller handwritten one, the letters shaky as if written in haste. This isn't all, she said, her voice lower, as if revealing a dangerous secret. He wrote more. They call themselves S. Namen, a group hidden in shadows. Not enemies, but not friends. They aim to save the church, but I fear they will destroy it first. She looked up, her gaze sweeping the audience. Namen? She repeated, the words ringing like a curse. I don't know who they are, but after he passed, I received this. Oh, she pulled a small black USB drive, unlabeled, from her pocket. It was sent to my home. No note, just this drive. I viewed its contents, and it confirms what he wrote. Hannity raised an eyebrow, his voice tense. You're talking about evidence. What can you share? Caroline nodded, signaling the tech team. A large screen behind her lit up, displaying a grainy video clearly filmed covertly. It showed a stone room in the Vatican, candlelight flickering. 4 men in black robes sat around a table whispering about dark pools and deals with Dubai. One mentioned Sinoman, his voice anxious. They know too much. We must stop them before the Cardinal finds out. The video cut off abruptly, the screen going black. The audience gasped, some raising phones to record. Hannity, visibly shocked, turned to Caroline. This is a conspiracy in the Vatican. Are you sure this video is real? I'm not sure, Caroline replied, her voice frank. But it came with a message. The Namian lives. I checked with an FBI friend. They said the footage is unedited but untraceable. Someone wanted me to see it, and now I want the world to see it. She turned to the audience, her voice urgent. The Pope wasn't just warning about one person. He spoke of a system, those who exploit faith to manipulate. He chose me because I'm outside the church, because I could speak when he couldn't. Suddenly, Caroline's phone buzzed on the table, a message flashing on the screen. She glanced at it, her face briefly paling, but she quickly regained composure. Hannity noticed, asking immediately, Is everything okay? What just happened? Caroline picked up the phone, reading quickly. You've gone too far, so Namian is watching. I got this just now, she said, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. She held the screen to the camera, the audience buzzing. They know I'm speaking and I won't stop. Hannity tried to regain control, his voice slightly unsteady. Caroline, you're putting yourself in danger. Do you think this is worth it? She looked directly at him, her eyes blazing. If I stay silent, everything he fought for becomes meaningless. I'm not just speaking for him. I'm speaking for those who still believe in good, even when the world tries to snuff it out. Social media erupted outside the studio on platforms with thousands of posts. Is she crazy or a hero? What is the Vatican hiding? Some audience members clapped, but many remained silent, as if overwhelmed by what they just witnessed. Carolyn placed the envelope and USB drive on the table, her voice ringing like a declaration of war. This is just the beginning, he said. The truth is aflame, and I won't let it go out. Hannity, for the first time in his career, seemed at a loss for how to proceed. He looked at Caroline, then turned to the audience, his voice hesitant. We need a moment to process. Caroline, is there anything else you want to share? She shook her head slightly, her eyes unwavering. Not done yet, but to understand it all, I need to show you one more thing. She pulled a small photograph from her pocket, holding it face down, and the studio sank back into tense anticipation. Backstage, a sudden strange noise erupted like someone shattering a glass pane. The audience murmured in panic, some standing, eyes darting. Caroline Leavitt, still standing tall, gripped the small face-owned photo, her gaze steely, but tinged with worry. The Vatican envelope and USB drive on. The table seemed to become the epicenter of an approaching storm. Sean Hannity, trying to stay calm, turned to Caroline, his voice urgent. Caroline, we just got a security alert. Do you know what's happening? And that photo, what are you going to show us? Caroline took a breath, her eyes scanning the crowd as if seeking an anchor in the chaos. I don't know who's out there, she replied, her voice low but resolute. But I know they don't want me to continue, and that's why I have to. She raised the photo, still face down, the studio lights reflecting off its glossy surface. This isn't just a picture. It's proof I wasn't alone. The night I met the Pope, Hannity, though flustered, kept his role as host. What do you mean? Is this photo tied to Snaman or something else? He signaled security but kept his eyes on Caroline. She nodded, her voice steady but waited. After he passed, I received this photo in the mail. No address, no note. It was taken the night I met him at Casa Santa Marta. She flipped the photo, showing Hannity first. The blurry image showed Caroline and the Pope in a stone corridor, light from a hanging lamp casting long shadows. But in the far corner, behind a pillar, was a cloaked figure, their face hidden in darkness. The audience buzzed, some leaning forward to see better. Han Placidity squinted, his voice tense. Who is this person? A witness or a stalker? Caroline placed the photo on the table, but kept it out of the camera's view. I don't know, she said, her voice briefly trembling, but quickly studying. But this wasn't the only time. I received 3 other photos from different sources over the years. Each time this figure appears, always at a distance, always hidden. Once in Rome, once in D.C., and once right outside my home in New Hampshire, she pulled a small envelope from her pocket, taking out 2 more photos and placing them beside the first. Look here, she said, pointing at each. Same build, same cloak. I hired a private investigator to check, but they found nothing. No fingerprints, no leads. Someone wants me to know they're watching, but doesn't want me to know who they are. Hannity shook his head, clearly drawn in, but skeptical. You think this figure is son Naaman or the enemy? The Pope mentioned. Caroline looked directly at him, unflinching. I think they're tied to both. In my dream, he told me, you'll see the darkness before you see the light. This figure could be part of San Naaman or someone opposing them, but what I'm certain of is they know about the envelope, about what I just revealed. She pointed to the first photo, her voice urgent. That night in the Vatican, I thought it was just me and him. But this photo proves someone else was there watching, recording, and if they photographed me, then they could be here right now. Her words sent a shock through the studio. Some audience members looked around as if searching for the mysterious figure in the crowd. Hannity, trying to regain control, asked, You're saying we're in danger right here? Caroline shrugged, a bitter smile flickering. I don't know, but I know truth always comes with risk. I brought this photo here because I want everyone to see what the Pope entrusted to me isn't fantasy. There are people out there, and they don't want the truth to come out. She turned to the audience, her voice rising like a call to action. I'm not asking you to believe me right away, but ask yourselves if there's nothing to hide. Why is someone trying to stop me from speaking? Why the threatening letters, the photos, and now this security alert? Suddenly, another sound rang out like metal clashing from backstage. The audience flinched, some letting out small screams. Hannity turned, signaling security, but Caroline didn't move. They're trying to scare me, she said, her voice cold as steel. But I promised him, and I'll keep my word no matter the cost. Hannity, his voice urgent, asked Caroline, Do you think you should stop for everyone's safety? She shook her head, her eyes blazing. Stopping is letting them win. I'm not just speaking for myself or for him. I'm speaking for those who've been silenced, who never got a chance to be heard. If I stop, who will carry on? She picked up the first photo, holding it up for the camera, finally letting the audience see the mysterious figure clearly. Look, she said, her voice strong. This is why he chose me. Because I'm not part of the church, not bound by their rules. I can show you what they want to hide. Social media flooded with posts. Who's the figure? She's being hunted. Some audience members clapped, but many remained silent as if caught in a mystery bigger than themselves. Caroline set the photo down, her voice low but fierce. This figure is one piece of the puzzle, but there's more, and I won't stop until I uncover the whole truth. Hannity, for the first time losing control, looked at her with a mix of awe and worry. Caroline, you're opening a dangerous door. Are you sure you're ready to walk through? She nodded, her eyes fixed on the camera. I walked through the moment I opened that envelope, and I won't turn back no matter what's waiting. The studio shook with another sound, the loud bang of a door being forced open backstage, echoing through the room, startling the audience, some crying out. Caroline Leavitt stood motionless, the photo of the mysterious figure still in her hand, her gaze icy but alert. The Vatican envelope, USB drive, and photos on the table stood as evidence of the storm she'd unleashed. Sean Hannity, trying to manage the situation, turned to the security team rushing in, his voice urgent. Caroline, we're having a security issue. You've just revealed shocking things. The video, the figure, Namdi. What happens now? What do you expect after all this? Caroline set the photo down, her eyes scanning the panicked crowd as if weighing the consequences of her actions. I don't expect peace, she replied, her voice low but sharp, each word deliberate. I knew when I opened that envelope, everything would change. But I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to keep a promise. Hannity signaled the audience to calm down, but the air remained taut as a wire. You've got the world's attention, he said, his voice tinged with admiration and concern. But do you think those people out there, the ones sending warnings, will leave you alone? What are you up against? Caroline gave a faint smile, a flicker of bitterness crossing her face. I don't know exactly, but I know they're scared. If not, why cause a disturbance? Why send the letters, the photos, and now that noise? She pointed toward backstage where security was investigating. They want me to stop, but that only makes me more certain. The truth I hold is a threat to them. The studio slowly stabilized, but the audience still buzzed. Phones raised to capture every second. Social media platforms dominated trends with thousands of posts. She just poked a hornet's nest. Who's behind Snowman? Some called her a hero, but others doubted. She's making it up for fame. Caroline seemed unfazed by the virtual chaos. She sat down, her eyes focused on Hannity. I don't expect everyone to believe me right away, she said, her voice steady but powerful. But I hope they'll ask questions. If there's nothing to hide, why try to silence me? Hannity nodded, trying to regain the rhythm. You've opened the envelope, shown the video, the photos, but do you think this will affect your job? The White House? The president? How will they react? Caroline hesitated for the first time that night, showing unease. I haven't told anyone at the White House about this, she admitted, her voice lower. They thought I came here to talk policy, but I know when this show ends, my phone won't stop ringing. I might lose some people's trust, maybe even my job, but I'm not doing this for my career. I'm doing it for something bigger. She recounted the moment right after leaving the studio in her imagination. I see myself stepping outside, facing dozens of reporters, cameras in my face. They'll ask what proof I have. If I'm scared, if I regret it, and I'll answer as I do now, I don't regret it. Because if I don't speak, who will? Suddenly, a studio staffer rushed over, whispering in Hannity's ear. He frowned, turning to Caroline. We just got word there's a group of people outside the building, unidentified, demanding to see you. Security's holding them back, but it's tense. Do you want to pause? Caroline shook her head, her eyes blazing. No, pausing is what they want. I'll say everything, even if I have only 1 minute left on air. She held the photo of the mysterious figure, her voice urgent. What I've shown you, the envelope, the video, the photos, is just the surface. The Pope saw a greater threat, not just to the church, but to all of us. And I won't let it be buried. The audience began to clap, but the applause was halting, mixed with unease. A woman in the front row shouted, She's telling the truth. Don't let them stop her. But another whispered to a friend, She's stirring trouble. This is too crazy. Caroline heard but didn't react. She looked straight into the camera, her voice ringing like a declaration. I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm only asking you to listen, because the truth doesn't need me to survive. It will find its way whether I'm here or not. Hannity, clearly captivated, asked, What's the next step? What will you do when you leave here? Caroline paused, her eyes heavy. I'll go home, hug my son, and tell my husband I did the right thing, but I know tonight won't be peaceful. My phone just got another message. She held up her phone, the screen displaying. Is naming does not forgive. You chose the wrong side. She read it aloud, her voice steady, but the audience sensed the danger. She set the phone down, her gaze resolute. They think I'll be scared. But I grew up in New Hampshire, where my grandmother taught me that faith is standing firm when everything falls apart. I won't run. Another sound erupted from backstage, this time security shouting. Hannity stood, his voice urgent. Caroline, we may have to cut the broadcast. Security says the situation out there is getting out of control. She stood too, the photo still in hand, her voice unwavering. Let them come. I've said what needed to be said. But this isn't the end. This is the start of a fight we all have to face. The audience was divided. Some clapped fervently, others shook their heads in doubt. Twitter kept exploding with posts, spreading clips of her holding the photo, the threatening message, and the strange noises. One account wrote, Caroline Leavitt just challenged the Vatican. Who is she? Another, this is a PR stunt, but dangerous. Caroline looked at Hannity, her eyes signaling she was ready for any consequence. I don't know what's waiting out there, she said, her voice low but strong. But I know I kept my promise to him, and that's all that matters. Hannity, for the first time that night, didn't know how to respond. He looked at her, then turned to the audience, his voice hesitant. We've just witnessed a historic moment. Caroline, thank you and be careful. She nodded, her eyes locked on the camera as if sending a final message to the world. Truth is never easy, but it's worth fighting for. The audience, having just watched Caroline Leavitt expose Pope Francis's secrets through the envelope, video, and photo of the mysterious figure, wavered between awe and fear. Some clapped, but many sat still, eyes fixed on Caroline, who stood tall, the photo in her hand like a battle flag. Sean Hannity, his face tense, tried to wrap up the show amid the chaos. Caroline, he said, his voice from the pressure, you've got the world's attention. But with what's happening out there, what will you do next? Caroline looked at him, her eyes unwavering, though her heart pounded. I'll keep going, she replied, her voice soft, but sharp as a blade, cutting through the noise. Not because I want to, but because I have to. The Pope saw what I didn't, a bigger battle, and I'm only just beginning. She stepped off the platform, the studio lights dimming as security moved in, escorting her out. The audience stood, some shouting, Caroline, don't give up. But she didn't look back, only clutched the photo as if it were a compass for the road ahead. Outside the studio, police sirens wailed, mixed with the shouts of an unidentified crowd. Social media posts spread clips of her holding the threatening message as, nominee does not forgive. One user wrote, she just challenged an invisible force, brave or insane. Another, protect her. When Caroline reached her DC home, it was late. She stepped into the quiet apartment, moonlight filtering through the curtains, and sat on the sofa opening her phone. Dozens of messages from colleagues, reporters, and unknown numbers. One stood out. No sender. This nominee is not the enemy. Find us where the light begins. Caroline frowned, her heart racing. She recalled the Pope's words in her dream. You'll see darkness before the light. Was this nominee an ally or a trap? The next morning, a package appeared at her door, unmarked. Inside was a wooden rosary, its faint scent evoking the New Hampshire church of her childhood, and a note, Son naming lives. Go where the flame is lit. Caroline gripped the rosary, feeling her grandmother beside her whispering, Don't be afraid, little one. She knew the flame could mean the Vatican or another cryptic location tied to the Pope. But going further meant putting her family at risk. She stood before the mirror looking at herself. No longer the young girl from New Hampshire, but a woman with a greater mission. Her phone buzzed. A call from a White House advisor. Caroline, the president wants to see you. What you said last night caused big trouble. You need to explain. She hung up, not answering. She knew the meeting could be a chance to save her career, but also pressure to stay silent. Outside, she heard a car creeping along the street, headlights sweeping past her window. Someone was watching, like the cloaked figure in the photo. Caroline sat at the table writing a letter to her son in case she didn't return. Mom did this so you could grow up in a world where truth still matters. Forgive me if I was wrong. She folded the letter, placing it in the safe with the Vatican envelope. She stood, gazing at the starlit night sky. "I promised him," she whispered as if the Pope were listening, "and I'll see it through." She put on her coat, grabbed the rosary, and stepped to the door. A cold wind blew, carrying unease. At the street corner, a figure lurked, cloak fluttering under the streetlight. Friend or foe, Caroline didn't know, but she didn't turn back. Social media remained ablaze with posts speculating about Sunnamen. Who are they? Reformers or terrorists? An anonymous account posted, "Carolyn Leavitt just opened Pandora's box. Pray for her." In the darkness, Caroline walked, the rosary tight in her hand, her heart burning with unyielding resolve. She didn't know where she was headed, the Vatican, a secret church, or a confrontation with Sunnamen. But she knew each step was a declaration. The truth would endure. Even if she fell, the figure in the distance seemed to beckon, to challenge. And Caroline, carrying both faith and fear, stepped into a journey no one could predict the end of. Caroline Leavitt's story, bravely exposing Pope Francis's secrets live on air, reflects the tensions and core values in American society today, where truth is often obscured by power, media, and fear. Her facing threatening letters, a mysterious figure, and pressure from the White House echoes the reality in America, where individuals, from journalists to whistleblowers, are often threatened when challenging the system. Her act of opening the envelope and revealing the video about a Vatican conspiracy reflects the spirit of free speech protected by the First Amendment, but also shows the cost of truth, the risk of losing safety, career, and trust from colleagues. Caroline's dream, where the Pope reminded her of childhood prayers, underscores the role of faith in family values, cultural foundations still vital to many Americans, especially in communities like her New Hampshire. Her decision to continue the journey, despite knowing she's watched like the cloaked figure symbolizes perseverance through adversity, a quality celebrated in the American dream. The lesson is to speak truth boldly, but brace for consequences. In American society where social media can amplify voices but also spark controversy, you must lean on personal values like Caroline's faith or her grandmother's teachings to overcome pressure. Act with a purpose bigger than yourself, as Caroline did for her son and community, but always protect loved ones. Truth, like the flame she mentioned, is worth fighting for, but requires wisdom to keep it burning without consuming yourself. Subscribe to the channel to explore Caroline and Sunnamen's next secrets. Thank you for joining us. See you in the next video with new revelations.